Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 18 of the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast, I'm excited to be exploring a topic we briefly covered before, fly fishing. Before we jump into all of that, I want to remind people that in a few short weeks, the first Monday in February, the new content will start to appear on the Outdoor Minimalist Patreon. If you haven't had a chance to check out what the Patreon tiers are, then head over to theoutdoorminimalist.com, the new website I created just for the podcast and book. And that will go into a few more details about each Patreon tier. But as a brief overview, what Patreon is basically listener support. So if you support the mission of Outdoor Minimalist, you can pay a monthly fee of either $5 or $10, and each of those options will give you different rewards. So the first tier, which is $5 a month, you would get access to all of the ad-free bonus episodes. And then tier 2, which is $10 a month, you get access to not only the ad-free bonus episodes, but you also get early releases of all of my episodes, which usually is about a month's worth at a time, 4 or 5, as well as an exclusive Q&A episode. So that way patrons can submit questions to me, and once I have enough questions, I will create a full-length Q&A episode just for you. So like I said before, if that's something that interests you at all, then head over to theoutdoorminimalist.com and learn more. Back to the topic at hand, fly fishing. So to me, fly fishing is a super interesting outdoor sport. I'm not necessarily someone that would ever go fishing, but it is a surprisingly low impact and minimalist endeavor, which is why I think it's important to talk about on the show. So to help me discuss all things fly fishing, I'd like to introduce Joe Mahler. Joe Mahler is a fly fishing author, illustrator, and casting coach. He fishes, canoes, and teaches in the waters of Southwest Florida and the Everglades. His work appears on FlyFisherman magazine, Salmon Steelhead, Outdoor Life, and many others. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax and hemp, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. So thank you for joining me today, Joe. I'm really excited to have you on the show and to learn a little bit more about you and your passions. So before we start talking about that, can you tell me a little bit more about your love for outdoor recreation and how you landed where you are in your career and activities today?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate you doing that. I can't, like a lot of people ended up in the outdoor world, I came from kind of a strange place. My background is advertising. I'm a writer and illustrator, mostly an illustrator, and I worked at agencies and that sort of stuff, and sold things to people that they really don't need, and all that. And 20 years ago, my wife told me we were moving to Florida. I'm originally from Indiana, and I didn't particularly want to move to Florida. And because I'd been here before, and all I saw was like beaches and which beaches are fine, but strip malls and that kind of thing. What I didn't realize is what was here was this incredible hundreds and thousands of miles of shoreline and backcountry and things that the people really never see when they think of Florida. So it took me a little while to find it. So as I said, I'm a writer by trade or an illustrator, and then a writer, and I started writing outdoor articles about 15 years ago. I've freelanced since I've been down here, and work really dried up. Things went kind of south, and it was just nothing was really coming in. So I was kind of down. My wife says, "What do you really want to do?" I said, "Well, I really want to write and illustrate outdoor articles. And so she said, why don't you do that? So I put together kind of a little marketing campaign for myself and sent to editors of magazines, and not really expecting much. And it really just took off from there. I've since written a couple of knot books, and I only used 3 knots, but I illustrated more than 100 knots. That was really interesting. I started teaching fly fishing about 20 years ago. Truly, that's my passion. I mean, I love fishing, but I love teaching. I really love teaching. So this is a maybe the best place in the world to do that, because I live in Southwest Florida, which Fort Myers, which I'm pretty close to Sanibel Island and pretty close to the Everglades, and so I have really just an endless supply of people that have come down for, maybe it's for a season or maybe it's for a week. And fly fishing, it might surprise you, but is just as good in the saltwater as it is. People think of trout fishing and fly fishing, but in saltwater, in backcountry, fishing in the swamps, all that, it's just wonderful.
Are there a lot of differences? I am not a fisher person. So are there a lot of differences in like that environment when you're not fly fishing in a stream? I feel like when I picture fly fishing, it's someone casting in a river like with mountains, you know?
Right? Yeah, we don't have the mountains. We have no mountain. We have the opposite of mountains here. There is and there's some equipment differences. I mean, it's obviously the prey is a lot of times bigger, so the equipment is heavier. The principles are all the same. And the part that I feel like I have the biggest contribution is getting people where they need to go. I mean, the message that I tell everybody is, if you want to do this, you can do it. It looks pretty intimidating, and it certainly can be. You see all sorts of things, but if you really want to do it, there's a way to do it, and you can practice, and it's very rewarding that way. But the classic, when people think of trout fishing, or fly fishing, they think of trout fishing in a mountain stream and that kind of stuff. Believe it or not, we do it out in the ocean and catch sailfish and tarpon and that sort of thing, which are hundreds of pounds. I don't do a lot of that. What I really like doing is the backcountry kinds of stuff. I love freshwater down here. That's kind of my love, is going in the Everglades. I paddle a lot. I canoe a lot, so that's my favorite way to go about it. And I guess I would, no matter where you go, whether it's out west, or it's in Michigan, or it's in Florida, for me, fly fishing has been like my magic carpet. I'm not sure I would have gone hardly any of the places that I've gone had it not been for fly fishing. It's what takes me to the and fish that eat flies like pretty places. And so I seriously would rather go someplace beautiful and not catch something than go to someplace that's not and catch a bunch. It's really not about the catch, and I think you'll find that a lot with fly fishing. People that are attracted to it are attracted to the motion, they're attracted to the skills, they're attracted to all those things, and really less about the catching part, which is fortunate for me.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I don't know if this is just because I am so unfamiliar with that sport and activity. I think it would be interesting to kind of just talk about how people can get involved in fly fishing. Especially, I think it's really interesting to take the approach of minimalism and apply it to a new activity that you're doing, because you don't really have to break any old habits. You don't have to purge any gear or anything like that. You're going in brand new, and you can make those connections yourself and kind of build that experience to fit what you need to accomplish.
Yes, absolutely. And I really think of myself as a mental minimalist. and and I say that because I love activities that require 100% concentration. So when you're fly fishing, you can't do it well and think about other things. Certainly when you're paddling a canoe and fly fishing, that really, I mean, that fills my space, that fills all the capacity I have right there. So for me, it's really relaxing, because it's a total commitment mentally to the thing. So you're really thinking about one thing. Some of the best students, and I teach, I do private lessons, and I do those nearly every day. The best students I have are the people who have no bad habits. I don't mean like drinking or smoking, but I mean, but that that have no bad habits as far as the skills involved. Everything's new. It's just as you said, and everything's exciting. As far as the equipment goes, as far as getting started, you know, it, it's just how people are. They want to buy all kinds of stuff. A golfer wants to buy a better game. A fly fisherman wants to buy a better rod to make them do better things. And it's really the opposite of that. It's, when somebody shows up, for a lesson or something, or I talk to them, they'll say, well, what kind of rod do you recommend? I said, what kind do you have? The one you've got's the best one right now. Just use it. It isn't going to make that much difference. At a high level, it makes a difference. But the important thing is that you have something to get out and get started with. Well, no, and I think the perception is that it's very expensive, and like anything, it sure can be, and there's worse things to spend your money on, but it doesn't have to be. If somebody, you could reasonably get started for less than $200.
That's a brilliant message to have, because a lot of times there is an accessibility issue, or the view of an accessibility issue in the outdoor industry. And so whenever people are asking me specifically about something that I would be familiar with, like rock climbing or backpacking, I am definitely in the same boat with starting with what you have and then kind of building from there. So maybe it is going out to get a guide or lessons like you teach, or renting equipment so you can try the different types of equipment before you invest in something that might be more expensive. With fishing, I'm trying to think of how I would approach that, because I don't know anything about fishing. I probably would go and get a guide if I was interested in fishing, because that way you're not just like casting into the dark or something and you know exactly what's going on.
Well, and I work with a lot of guides. A lot of guides will refer me to people because, in where I am down here, you're going to go out for a half a day and spend $400 for a guide. Well, you're on the front of the boat, he's on the back of the boat, and push poling around, keeping you safe, all that, looking for fish. It's a horrible time to learn skills. It's the worst time to learn skills. So typically, and I call it my guerrilla casting lesson, is that I give them the skills they need for the next day. Okay, so you've got this guide. I know where you're going. Here's, you're going to have to deal with wind. You're going to have to deal with some things. There's a certain, 40 feet is kind of a minimum. It's pretty long for trout fishermen, but it's kind of the minimum distance that you would want to be away from the fish in the kind of fishing that we do down here, backcountry saltwater and freshwater.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I didn't even really think about how the guide would be able to help you apply those skills. But that makes a lot of sense, that having those specific lessons for something more technical makes your guiding experience a lot better.
It is, yeah. And, a guide's number one job is to get you back to the dock alive. That is.
It's not necessarily teaching you how to do everything correctly.
No, that's way down on the list. It's it's getting you back safely. It's making sure it's enjoyable, because that's pretty important. And thirdly, it would be catching fish, and people kind of get confused about that. And so if you show up and you can have all the great conditions, you can have the presence of the fish, you can have nice wind and calm seas or whatever. If you don't have the skills, it's a waste of your money. Some of the best students I have are the people who have maybe gone down to the Keys and they've spent $2,000 on a guide days and whatever, only just to get yelled at and catch nothing because they weren't prepared. And so that's what I do. I prepare people for, and it's kind of funny because my background's trout fishing. I've done a lot of stream fishing. When the people live in Florida, when they go out west, I train them on how to trout fish. I have a small stream here that I take them on, which has no trout in it whatsoever, but we learn those skills and moving water skills versus wind and distance casting, that sort of thing.
I appreciate your perspective on like the different ecosystems, because I've been to Florida, but I feel like I was a lot younger. I was probably in middle school or something, and I feel like we went to Disney World. That's all I know about Florida. And so I've always been really interested in the Everglades, but other than fly fishing, what is kind of like special about the Southeast to you?
If you came to Florida, you should do a swamp walk. I think it would, because you hear people. I mean, Florida gets kind of a bum rap. I mean, there's people here that really, really care about the environment and work really hard to make it better. There's a group called Captains for Clean Water that I work with. It's restoring the Everglades, and trying to make things better. When you think about it, think, oh, well, I'm not going to walk through a swamp. It's a completely different experience than it. I mean, it can be life changing because you think, well, I'd never go in there. There's alligators and snakes. Once you get in the swamp and you're part of it, it all makes sense. The water's like crystal clear, but the bottom's brown, so it looks swampy until you get in there, and you can see your shoes on the bottom. Much of it's hard bottom, so it's not really muddy like you think. And the whole alligators and snakes, I mean, they're certainly there, but it's not what you think. The danger, I mean, danger's everywhere, but they don't swim up and bite you. They usually go the other direction.
Yeah, they're really like any other type of wildlife where they pose a risk, and you should be aware of them, but you don't necessarily need to be so fearful. But I'll be honest, I definitely would be afraid of alligators if I was in that environment, so.
Yeah. And I'm around them all the time, so it's like I'm afraid of bulls. I don't really like. I mean, back in Indiana, we would fish. We'd cut through the farmer's field, and it's like, and we'd never really had a close encounter, but I was always like petrified of bulls, and then come to find out that there wasn't too much to be afraid of, but yeah. So I mean, there's those things, but again, I would recommend strongly that, and there's you can do those on your own. I would recommend that you take a guided walk. You can get lost and stuff, but there's down at the I don't know if you've heard of Clyde Butcher. He's sort of the Ansel Adams of the South. For years he's done all these beautiful swamp, and he would set up and 24 hours to get a ghost orchid blooming or something like that, and you can go down, you can hike through that, you can do a swamp walk through that area. It's absolutely just really refreshing and really beautiful. I'll have to say that most of the swamp walks I've done have been to get someplace. I go back to my fly rod. It was maybe it's been based on a rumor that there was this place back there with all these fish in it or something. So the first couple of times I went on those things, I thought, okay, this is crazy, but I'm with somebody that knows what they're doing, and now I turn out to be the person that knows what they're doing.
That's kind of how it works, right?
Who saw that coming?
That's awesome. So whenever I talk to anyone that's really passionate about any type of outdoor pursuit, there always seems to be that really important level of connection to the landscape and the activity and everything like that. So when do you think that connection and your mental minimalism approach really started to come into your life? Was it always there, or?
It was always there. It's always what I wanted to do, and has always, I mean, the earliest photo, I have it on my wall here. I'm probably 3 years old, and I'm holding a fish, at my uncle's pond. I think for me, it really is kind of a product of not being mechanically inclined. I absolutely avoid things with moving parts. Boat motors, bilge pumps, all those, all those things just complicate, and you end up spending all your time on that, and you're worrying about is the motor going to start and whatever. And if my paddle breaks, I've got duct tape, I can fix it. That level of repair I can do. And down here we have a lot of boats, and we have trailers, and trailer lights never work. You have to wiggle them and jiggle them, and those are the kinds of things that take the fun out of it for me. So for me, it's eliminating those things that can go wrong and focusing on the things that I can control.
Yeah, and that's kind of just a less is more kind of approach in my mind. It's like the less items that you have, the lower likelihood of some type of complication in my head. I think that's where it goes for me.
It is, yeah, and the more stuff you take, it just takes more maintenance and more, and it's pretty interesting that if you really think about what you're going to use. A really good example is that when I started guiding, I talked to an emergency room doctor who is actually also a rock climber, and I said I want to put together a first aid kit to carry. He goes, yeah, take duct tape and baby aspirin. That's it. And he goes, anything beyond that, you don't know what you're doing. I said, well, should I take some nitroglycerin or something? He goes, if you want to kill somebody, yeah, And so, and it was pretty interesting. He says, if somebody has a heart attack, give them a baby aspirin and, get back to the ramp or whatever. And the duct tape, which I actually used one time, I was at an outpost lake up in Canada. and it was the kind of thing where you get dropped off, and when we got there, there was, the boat chained to the tree and that kind of stuff, and there was another group of people there, and the guy had a huge gash on his hand, and he came up, and they were signaling us and went up there, and I tell you what, that duct tape worked like a charm. We had it, and he went back, and we saw him out on the lake fishing and that kind of stuff. But so that was it. That was all the information I got, because I was prepared to get, the antiseptics and the whatever. It's like he goes, duct tape and baby aspirin.
Yeah, so I guess it could apply to a lot of different things. What do you recommend, I guess, for someone that is kind of just starting out, or even like has like a small interest in fly fishing, no matter where they're located? What is kind of a baseline type kit?
A kit. So you need a rod, reel, line. So the biggest difference in fly fishing and other types of fishing, we'll call it traditional fishing, is that with traditional fishing, you have a weight, you have a lure of some sort. Maybe you have a worm on a hook, maybe you have a lure, a spoon, something like that. Well, you have a weight that you throw. And with fly fishing, you're throwing something that's absolutely, I mean, it's almost weightless. So the line is actually the weight that's being transferred. I won't even say thrown, because it's not. It's moved back and forth, you know, kind of in this beautiful unrolling thing. And the fly line is the big. If somebody's starting out, the sticker shock that they're going to get is not the rod, it's not the reel, it's the line. Lines are like $100, and people are like, just for the line, but that's really the heart of the whole thing. And that's the biggest difference in fly fishing, and that's why people like the motion. They like that, that elegance that the line has when it unrolls and presents a fly. The real advantage of fly fishing over other types of fishing is that most of the time, as the saying goes, elephants eat peanuts. Fish, even though they eat big stuff, they spend most of their time eating insects or tiny bait fish. We don't Insects aren't really a part of what I do down here, but they eat little tiny frogs and tadpoles, little tiny bait fish. Well, it's impossible to present that with traditional equipment, because there's no weight to it. In fly fishing, you can present a weightless, fly, or, we use the term fly pretty loosely. It could be imitate a minnow or a crayfish or a number of things. You can present that weightless presentation, and that's the real advantage to it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like make those connections in my head. I have such a minimal understanding of fishing, so
Yeah, and so what's interesting about fly fishing is that a lot of people that I've coached, and I say coach, it's really what it is. Sometimes it's, and I have students from people who have never done it before, and people who have done it for 20 years and want to build, get advanced skills, or, expert level skills. But when you start fly fishing, they're attracted to it because of that motion, and because of, okay, this looks like something I can do. And I've always felt that people that drive manual transmissions are better drivers than people that drive automatics, because they are the engine. They're part of the engine. They're everything that happens. They're part of it, and there's no mindlessness when you're driving a stick. You're part of every bit, and that's how fly fishing is. And that's the best comparison I can make between traditional fishing and fly fishing. Is the reel is not really of any significance, because you don't really use it. You retrieve the fly by pulling the line in by hand, and every bit of the cast is done. You're using both hands. And when people that don't fish think of fishing, they think, oh yeah, I'm gonna throw it out there and sit and watch it. Well, early on, I mean, I've always been fidgety. You can probably tell I'm kind of fidgety. And so what I didn't like was when my dad would take me fishing, and it was like we'd throw it out, and he'd say, now sit there and watch the bobber. I didn't care anything about catching fish. I just wanted to reel it in and throw it out again. That's all I wanted to do. And I remember there was a guy in our town. I remember I said, he was kind of a jack of all trades, and I said I wanted to fly fish. He goes, well, you could never do that. You don't have the patience. And it is exactly the thing that you should do if you don't have the patience, because it's constant movement. You're constantly involved. You're the engine of this whole thing. And that's what really attracted me to fly fishing.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, at least for someone with my perspective, because, yeah, when I think of fishing, because I grew up in the Midwest, in like rural Minnesota, and so a lot of people in my life would go out and fish, but they would just sit and like watch it. Same with ice fishing. You just sit in the shack and just watch it. And I was like, that's so
But don't you
boring.
drink too, right? When you do that?
Yeah, you play cards and stuff, but
Gotcha,
but
gotcha.
you're not
Yeah.
paying attention and you're not really like engaged physically or mentally. You're just kind of existing in that space, even to the point of maybe dissociating and just zoning out. And so it's really interesting to me to be like, oh, that type of fishing, fly fishing, could really kind of put you in a flow state to an extent because you are so involved.
That's a great term. Yeah. A flow state. I love that.
Yeah, you usually only really hear that with endurance type sports, but I think you can find it with a lot of other activities because it's just like a mental application, you know?
Yeah, that's true. And the overwhelming part of fly fishing is probably what I deal with most. Somebody say, "Well, there's so much and there's so many books and everything," and it's like it can be as complicated as you want, or like I said, I've written 2 knot books and illustrated them, but I really only use 3 knots. I'm not telling you not to buy my books, but I use 3 knots, and for me that it's like I want something that I can tie in the dark if I need to, or I can tie when when the wind's blowing, or all these things. I don't want to, I just want to be able to do that in a kind of a subconscious way. One other thing and we're talking about equipment, and I think the best thing that ever happened to the fly fishing industry, the business part of it, is the invention of the fly fishing vest. So you've seen those before with the pockets and all that stuff. They wear them. Yeah, and here's why: is because I counted on mine, which I never wear. It has 11 pockets, and because people are people, they're going to fill every one of those pockets, and they're going to, and so when you get into fly fishing, okay, well, I need this and I need that and I need that. It's like the truth of the matter is you don't need very much of it at all. So, but they'll show up with the vest filled with everything imaginable, and things, zingers hanging off of it, and retractable, I don't know, whatever. But it was a genius thing, whoever came up with the fishing vest.
To get people to buy more stuff.
Yeah, you got to fill the pockets.
That's really interesting.
You're going to fill whatever space you have. It kind of looks pathetic if the pockets are empty.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So,
true.
yeah. So yeah, I usually stick a little bit of, yeah, we call it tippet, but it's fishing line that you might need, and just a few flies, and that's really it for me. And so that goes in my shirt pocket.
Just kind of thinking about that gear piece and people's, I don't want to say obsession, but like they often gravitate towards those pieces of gear because that's kind of what's presented to them in a lot of different media and things like that. So what would be one piece of advice that you'd give a brand new fly fisherman, or even just someone in that beginner realm? And it doesn't have to be gear related, but just like general advice as they approach this activity.
The general advice would be is that there is no deadline. Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. It's a personal thing. If you're doing, a lot of people say, well, I want you to look at my cast. I don't know if I'm doing it right. It's like, are you having fun? Are you enjoying it? Then you're doing it right. If you want to do it better, I can help with that. But if you're going out and having fun, and you're not feeling, like, well, I look stupid out there. Look, everybody looks stupid at some point. Practice and you won't look stupid anymore. I was really fortunate growing up. I had a dad that didn't really candy coat things, and I remember, whining about, we had a pool table, and I was whining about, it's like, well, I never get to win or anything like that. And he goes, why would you? You have to get better. you know and he never let me win. So that's what I tell people. It's like, it's fine if you're happy where you are. If you want to get better, you need to practice, you need to put the time in, and you need to just do it. But there's no deadline, is it really is the point.
Yeah, when I am just listening to you kind of say that, it reminds me of what you said at the beginning, was starting with what you have, but then also you talking about the mental minimalism, because it is about being in that present moment and really kind of like enjoying it, experiencing it, and learning to improve on that activity because you love it.
One other thing that a bit of advice that I would give is, if you're going to spend some money, and you're going to start, go buy a life jacket that you like the looks of, that you'll wear, that's comfortable,
A life jacket.
and just get used to it.
Well, because you're on the ocean, you're not like standing
A
in a
life
river,
jacket.
so that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? But even on a rivers can be much, like the Madison River, and you take a tumble in that, and it could, people die every year from those sorts of accidents. But get an inflatable that you whatever when it gets wet. I've got some of those, but that really is the most important thing.
Yeah, well, that really showed how much I really know about fishing, but also that kind of goes back to identifying your needs and the essentials. So, like, having that safety equipment right off the bat would be, it seems like, the more valuable investment so you can be comfortable and safe.
Yeah, and like I say, I paddle a lot, and I just always wear one. I mean, I swim laps every day, but I wear my life jacket when I go out. It's just part of, and I do it for a couple of reasons. First, I want to set a really good example for people because it's like, you should do it. But also, you just don't know. And that's one thing that you can control. So I would say, go get something you like. Go get something that, whatever. Go something that has pockets so you can fill them with gear or whatever you want to do. I don't know. But no, that would be just my little soapbox.
No, those are really good tips, and I think it's applicable to more than just fly fishing for people to start thinking about how they invest their time and their money in that specific activity. So, how can people learn more about what you're doing and your work in Florida, and how can they reach out to you if they have questions?
I'm the easiest person to find. If you so it's joemahler.com, Mahler, and like I say, I have I have a course set up at in my neighborhood here. We have our like own little park, so I have a pond and I have a grassy area, and I know the neighbors are highly suspicious of what I do out there every day, casting in the grass. But and that's the other thing that I might say is that you'll learn more by practicing in the grass than you will. And it sounds strange that you're fishing in the grass, but that really is a place to learn. And I set up cones, and it looks like a canine training course, but it's really a lot of fun to do. So they can get a hold of me there, and I write for FlyFisherman magazine. I do some how-to articles, so they can if they just Google me, it'll pop up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll put a link to your website and your books in the episode description. But one thing that I think we kind of missed talking about that I was really interested in is your art. So what do you make art specifically for publications like your Not book, or is it also you do it just in general and people can buy prints?
Yeah, no, and that's an interesting thing. So I'm an illustrator by trade, and that's what I've done all my life. So to me, I wouldn't even say that I'm an artist because if I have a day with nothing to do, the last thing I'm going to do is draw. I don't know if you're familiar with storyboards for TV commercials and that sort of thing, and I've done hundreds of those over the years. So to me, drawing is kind of like work. It's really I really think of illustration like another language, and I'm just explaining things with pictures. So I won't say that there's no desire, but there's very little desire to make art. I don't even think about it until somebody has either a client or me where I have a need. It's like, well, this need, and that's kind of how I got into writing articles. I've got kind of a backward way of doing it. I do the illustrations first, and then I write about the pictures.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is a different approach. Usually I think of it the other way.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's no query letters here. There's nothing like that. So I have a great relationship with Fly Fisherman magazine and Ross Purnell, the editor, and it's just like he understands that. But it's really hard for me to sit down and do like an outline. I wasn't a great student to say the least, but doing the outline to me I'm going to end up just doodling on the paper or something like that. So I really have to decide what it is I want to say, sketch that out, and then explain yeah. So
I mean, if the process works for you, that's what's important.
it does. Yeah. I enjoy it. I truly enjoy. I don't want to write every day. I don't want to illustrate every day anymore. But I truly enjoy it when I do. And so I'm involved with a group called Fish with a Hero, and it's disabled veterans. Project Healing Waters is part of what, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we work with disabled vets on learning fly fishing. And I will tell you that anybody that has a desire to do it can do it. We end up with people with various, disabilities, some obvious and some not. And early on, I got the advice, and I remember this every time I do a lesson, is that, and not just disabled people, but others. People don't need one more thing they can't do. They need one more thing they can do. And I start out every lesson with that. It's like, how do I make this enjoyable? How do I make you understand how much fun you can have at whatever level? I had a fellow. It was crazy, but he called and he made an appointment for a lesson, and that sort of thing. And he shows up, and he has one arm. He has one arm. And so there was no denying. I looked at him and I said, how are we going to do this? He goes, that's what I'm paying you for. And I will tell you that it was one of the most rewarding things. We spent a couple hours just figuring out how he can do this. And he went out the next day with a buddy of mine that guides in the salt water, and he caught this really nice pompano. And it was a whole thing to figure out how do you get the thing in, but he did it, and he had this great attitude. It's like, I know it's going to be hard. I know I have one arm, but I want to do this. And so I think about that guy and that's probably been 8 years ago, but I think about him often, because it's like, okay, if you want to do it, we'll figure out a way to get it so it's, you're to an enjoyable state.
Yeah, that is a really cool story. And it goes back to your just try to have fun and just kind of apply yourself.
Yeah, so that's really the message that I've got. It's pretty simple. If you want to do it, you can do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. I really have enjoyed this, and I enjoy your podcast. You've got some great subject matter on there, and as I was telling you earlier, I learned a lot from listening to some of those.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So I just want to say thank you again to Joe for taking the time to be on the show today. I learned a lot about fly fishing, and I hope that you did too. Like I said before, I will share a link in the episode description about how to contact Joe, about his writing, illustrations, or even if you're in Florida, how to take a fly fishing lesson. I'll also share links to his knot books, as well as some of the organizations that he mentioned in the episode. So thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. Follow there for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.